In this presentation, we will look at procurement and contract management. Here is a famous saying about procurement and contracting. When there is a negotiation, there is a hope for agreement. Before we start, I will first introduce myself. Hey, this is Amy Law, your presenter. I have been working in IT for over 20 years in pipelines, energy regulator, oil and gas, utilities, transportations, and telecommunications. I have managed projects for over 15 years in IT applications and infrastructure, system and data migration, cybersecurity, ECM, SAP, process improvement, and office facilities. In terms of education, I completed bachelor and master in computer science from the University of Calgary. I received my PMP in 2006. I also completed certifications in project management, change management, ISO 27001, Information Security Management System, and ITIL. Contract administration is the process of managing the contract and the relationship between the buyer and seller. This includes the reviewing and documenting how a seller performed. As a project manager, I have been taking the role on contract administration, in which I ensure appropriate actions are taken to eliminate any deficiency discovered in contract implementation, scope, or terms and conditions. A buyer has many obligations. Some of the obligations include invoice payment by the due date, giving vendor resources with an appropriate access to the place of work, timely approvals, information and decisions, and acceptance upon delivery. As a project manager, I have been taking the responsibilities on behalf of the buyer to arrange appropriate access for the contractors. I provide acceptance or rejection upon delivery of the product. I review and approve or reject invoice on a timely fashion. I also ensure process payment takes place according to the payment terms and schedule. During the contract administration process, we input contract management plan, selected sellers, performance reports, approved change request, and work performance information. We use the contract change control system, buyer conducted performance review, inspections and audit, performance reporting, payment system, records management system, and information technology. We get the contract documentation, requested changes, recommended corrective actions, organizational process access update, and project management plan update as the outputs. Here is a sequential process for contract administration. First, we have initiation with a contract award. The term contract award refers to the process of formally notifying a vendor that they have been selected as the supplier for a specific contract. Next, we have planning with contract documents. Contract documentation means any drawing, diagram, calculation, design, specifications, data sheet, schedules, and other key documents relating to the contract. Next, we have contract execution with contract work performance. Contract execution is the process of signing a contract, after which its terms become binding. Most importantly, we have controls, as in integrated change control, scope verification, scope change control, cost control, schedule control, quality control, performance reporting, risk monitoring and control. Finally, we have contract closeout. We have 4 types of scope change control. The first type is administrative change, such as a change of address. One of my clients moved some of their staff from a refinery site to a new downtown office. That is, they added a new address. This led to a change of address. Specifically, this is an addition of the new downtown office to the SAP system while keeping the refinery site address in the SAP system for historical tracking. The second type is change order, such as in pricing or not. As a project manager, I have managed several contractors' pricing changes. For example, a vendor resource increased their hourly rate by $20 as they were promoted to a senior functional analyst. Another example is that a contractor left the vendor. As such, a new backup resource replaced the contractor, leading to an additional time needed for a proper transition. The third type is supplemental agreement, like major changes in the contract. For example, a buyer has increased the project scope, leading to additional deliverables, extended schedule, and an increase to the overall contract value. As a project manager, I work with the vendor to prepare a supplemental agreement. The final type is constructive change, as in a contractor performed assignment differently than required by the contract due to a wrongful interpretation of the contract terms. Any contract change requires an approval in advance between the buyer and seller. The contract change eventually becomes a contract itself. As part of the scope verification, we ensure scope is delivered according to the contract. This is done through regular inspection and verification. We can use requirements traceability matrix to document all requirements proposed by the buyer in a single document. It is a document that maps and traces requirements with test cases. It can be used to track progress. The itemized requirements are regularly validated and verified, which is the basis for progress payments. As part of the cost control, we define payment process. This includes the approval process and settlement of the payment. One of my clients used a SAP system to manage invoice approval and payment process. The automated workflow and email notification make approval and payment efficient and timely. In addition, the SAP system automatically tracks audit trail so that we have a database tracking who and when approval took place, along with the associated comment for each level of the approvals. We also need to be mindful to verify change order pricing and process change orders. One of my clients depends on manual invoice validation. As such, change order pricings could be overlooked, resulting to a misalignment to the contract and overspent above and beyond the contract value. On a regular basis, we forecast the cost of uncommitted work and take corrective action if the forecast is higher than planned. We may have to call for back charges. For example, back charges could be requested for cleanup or to repair something damaged by another subcontractor, such as a broken window for a house renovation. As part of the schedule control, we regularly review vendor schedule and measure their progress and performance. It is important to have an integrated project schedule between vendors and buyer. The integrated project schedule becomes the baseline for regular progress review. If we have to expedite, we leveraged the integrated schedule to seek opportunity for earlier delivery. We also collaborate with the vendors together to solve problems. Typically, progress report is provided on a monthly basis. The progress report includes deliverables, schedule, and payment review. As part of the quality control, we review vendors' quality assurance plan to ensure it aligns with the buyer's requirements and expectation. For example, the buyer has 3 internal IT environments, including development environment, test environment, and production environment. If the vendor does not have these 3 IT environments, there is a misalignment from the buyer's quality control. We also monitor vendors' quality control through their deliverables and process. The deliverables and process must be well defined in the form of the SMART. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. We also make implied warranties. For example, a house roof should not leak because of the implied requirements. If it is not clear or sure, then make it explicit as appropriate. As part of the human resources management, we develop and maintain a sound working relationship with vendors' labor. This can be done through active listening, communications, and building trust. We need sufficient qualified vendors' labor. This means we assess the vendor's resources in terms of their availability and capability. Are they available as per the planned schedule? Are they competent to perform the work to meet the requirements and quality within the timeline? In most cases, we assess vendors through their certifications and prior experience in similar projects. As part of the risk response control, we verify vendors' financial stability and their labor changes. There are some common, relatively easy detectable warning signs, including delays in producing products and services, decline of credit rating, financial dependency on 1 or 2 customers, especially government, high visibility technology failures and/or legal action, cost cutting, major organizational restructure, massive layoff, raw material shortages affecting the industry, and rumored acquisition target. This type of risk must be monitored and addressed, potentially with a backup or alternative vendor. We also monitor an implementation of the risk plan through the monthly statement of paid bills and statement of outstanding claims. Without the monthly statement of outstanding claims, the payment should not be made. We also monitor scope, cost, schedule, quality control, and so forth. As part of the communication management, we leveraged a single point of contact. This keeps communication between parties simple, prevents problem from being addressed multiple times at different points in the supply chain, and ultimately saves a lot of time and money over the course of a project. It is important to interpret contract documents correctly. We can consider the use of requirements traceability matrix. It is a document that demonstrates the relationship between requirements and other deliverables. This is used to prove that requirements have been completed, and it typically documents requirements, test result, and issues. To ensure the correct interpretation, we review vendors' progress report against the requirements traceability matrix. We monitor vendor claims and encourage early identification and communication of problems. It is significantly more expensive to fix an issue late in the project or after the product went into production. Material handling is the movement, protection, storage, and control of materials throughout manufacturing, warehousing, distribution, consumption, and disposal. Typically, a buyer receives the materials from the vendor. The buyer inspects and tests the materials for acceptance or rejection. Then the buyer stores the material in the inventory. At the right time, the buyer releases the materials for use. To avoid dispute, we need to identify problems early through the monitoring of progress report, earned value, and payment systems. The buyer must review the vendor's progress report on a monthly or even weekly basis to ensure any issues are discovered and addressed as early as possible. The buyer must also review the earned value, that is, the vendor's actual work completed, is aligned with the project plan so that all parties can assure the project is on track. Payment can be processed only if and when the work is completed, is aligned to the project plan under the contract's terms and conditions. We must know the contract and the law so that we can communicate and document any known issues. As a project manager, it is extremely important to review and understand all documents before approval. For example, if a seller has delivered an incomplete, defective, or late product, and the client PM knowingly accepts it without objection or does not demand the defect be addressed, then the client PM may have waived the right to strict performance. To resolve dispute, we can leverage negotiation, mediation, and arbitration. We can also use the dispute review board and litigation. Negotiation is communication. Mediation is a structured and interactive process in which an unbiased third party assists disputing parties in resolving conflict through the use of specialized communication and negotiation techniques. Arbitration is a private process where disputing parties agree that one or several individuals can make a decision about the dispute after reviewing all the evidence. Arbitration is different from mediation because the unbiased arbitrator has the authority to make a decision about the dispute. Litigation is the process of taking legal action. In comparison, litigation is more expensive and more time-consuming than mediation and arbitration. Contract closure is the process of completing the contract, including the resolution and closing of any open items. Conditions to closure include contract work completion, successful product verification, and delivery of work documentation. Early termination of a contract is a special case of contract closure. For example, one of my clients was split into two companies. As a result, any in-flight projects were either canceled or put on hold. This has ripple effect to contract with several vendors resulting in early termination. During the contract closure process, we input the procurement management plan, contract management plan, contract documentation, and contract closure procedure. We use the procurement audits and records management system. We get the closed contracts and organization process assets update as the output. Here is a sequential process for contract closure. First, we gather all contract documentation. Next, we ensure the completion of product verification, work documentation, and formal acceptance. Finally, we proceed to procurement audit and vendor post-contract evaluation. Contract documentation includes contract, schedule, approved contract changes, seller-developed technical documentation, seller performance report, invoices and payment record, inspection report, and all paperwork generated since contract signing. During product verification, we validate delivery against contract documentation. We leveraged a completion checklist to account for all necessary items. We perform inspection, testing, and startups of the deliverables. As a result, we established deficiency list. As a part of the change management, we verify training and associated materials. We also need to ensure spare part and startup materials are supplied. In terms of work documentation, we include operating manuals, maintenance manuals, training manuals, testing procedures, and as-bills. The operating and maintenance manual contains information and strategies designed to guide operational stakeholders in the normal use and maintenance of the product. The purpose of a training material is to organize how we train the users to use the product. A training manual guarantees that users do not miss important instructions. A test procedure is a formal specification of test cases. It is executable to verify the product and produce an exception report indicating which test cases failed. The as-built are drawings with revisions created and submitted by a contractor after a project is finished. They contain any changes made from the initial drawings and provide an exact blueprint of the product as it appears upon completion. A formal acceptance captures the agreement of the customer, sponsors, and other key stakeholders that a product has been completed and meets the contract requirements. It can be a partial acceptance or complete acceptance. Acceptance is based on criteria that were determined as part of the contract. They include performance requirements and essential conditions which must be met before a product is accepted. Some examples of the acceptance criteria include the backup and restore testing has been completed successfully, and user acceptance testing has been completed and signed off. In the substantial performance of work is ready for use, and the buyer takes ownership and reviews a list of bugs and deficiencies. In a total performance of work, entire work is ready, and the seller has issued a written certificate to the buyer confirming that the work has been completed in accordance with the requirements. In some cases, we have holdback. In the holdback, a specific dollar figure or 10% of the total contract value is not released to the seller until deficiencies are rectified. Procurement audit can be formal and informal. The formal audit includes the company's audit department and external auditors to examine the structure, documentation, communications, negotiation, and outcomes. The informal audit can be brainstorming by project team members and meeting minutes with one team member writes a post-mortem. An example of the informal audit is lessons learned, in which we identify and document successes and failures. A vendor post-contract evaluation is a subset of procurement audit, it is recorded and added the evaluation to the company vendor database. One of my clients has a vendor management office, VMO, which manages and tracks the result of vendor evaluation in their VMO database. Thank you very much for your time. Please contact me for additional project management templates and samples. Here's my contact information.